Every morning, someone wakes up believing today will finally be different, not extraordinary. Just a little better than yesterday. They don't ask for millions. They don't dream about private jets. They just hope. This month, they won't fall behind again. Maybe this month, they'll finally save something. Maybe this month, life won't surprise them with another unexpected expense. Maybe this is the month everything finally changes. I've whispered those exact words to myself before, more times than I'd like to admit. Back then, I genuinely believed one thing. If I simply worked harder, life would eventually reward me. It sounded reasonable. After all, that's what almost everyone tells us. Study hard, work hard, stay out of trouble. Everything else will eventually work itself out. But one morning, standing there, I looked around. Construction workers, teachers, cashiers, office workers, delivery drivers, nurses, every single one of them looked tired. That's when something hit me. Every person on that bus had somewhere important to be. Everyone was working. Everyone was sacrificing something. Yet somehow, most of us still felt like we were barely keeping our heads above water. I kept asking myself, if working hard is the answer, why are so many hardworking people still struggling? Nobody ever gave me an answer. Instead, they repeated the same advice, just keep going. So I did. Day after day, week after week, month after month, time kept moving. But my life didn't seem to move with it. Payday always felt exciting, for about 5 minutes. For a brief moment, you feel ahead. You breathe easier. You think, this month is different. Then rent arrives. Then electricity, internet, water, insurance. Then groceries somehow cost more than they did last month. Again. Nothing unusual happened. Life simply happened. I used to blame myself. I thought I wasn't disciplined enough. Maybe I wasn't smart enough. Maybe everyone else had figured something out that I hadn't. But the more people I talked to, the more I realized something. Almost everyone was quietly fighting the same battle. They just weren't talking about it. Different jobs, different cities, different lives, the same feeling. I work so hard, why am I still stuck? That sentence changed everything because once I stopped blaming myself, I finally started looking for the real reason. And what I found was something I had never heard anyone explain before. Not in school, not at work, not even in conversations about money. It was an invisible cycle, a cycle that quietly keeps millions of hardworking people exactly where they are, without them ever realizing they're running in circles. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because something terrible had happened, but because nothing had happened. And somehow, that felt even worse. Have you ever reached the end of a month and wondered where all your effort went? Not your money, your effort. Because every dollar cost you time. Sometimes I think we forget what money actually represents. It isn't paper, it isn't numbers. It's pieces of our lives. Hours we'll never get back. Energy we can't recycle. Time we can't earn twice. I started looking at every receipt differently, not asking, what did this cost? Instead, what part of my life did this cost? Bread, milk, rice, electricity, bus fare. None of these were luxury purchases. They were simply life. That's when something quietly changed inside me. Maybe I wasn't failing. Maybe I was surviving. And those are two very different things. We spend so much time feeling guilty that we never stop to ask better questions. Instead of asking, why am I so bad with money? Maybe we should ask, what game am I actually playing? Because one day I realized I wasn't walking toward financial freedom. I was walking in circles. And that's the thing about circles. You can move all day without ever getting closer to your destination. For the first time, I could finally see it, not just feel it, see it. The poverty loop, the invisible machine that convinces hardworking people they're making progress, while quietly keeping them exactly where they started. But here's what shocked me the most. The poverty loop doesn't begin with money. It begins with something much smaller, a belief. One belief that almost all of us are taught as children. A belief that sounds completely reasonable, yet quietly shapes almost every financial decision we make. And once you see it, you'll never look at money the same way. When I was growing up, I heard one sentence more than almost anything else. Work hard and everything will be okay. At the time, I believed it completely because the people telling me believed it too. Our parents weren't trying to mislead us, they were giving us the best advice they knew. And for many years, that advice worked. But somewhere along the way, the world changed, the rules changed, the cost of living changed, yet the advice stayed exactly the same. Food became more expensive, housing became more expensive, transportation became more expensive, but our income didn't always keep up. That's when I realized something uncomfortable. Hard work is important, but hard work alone doesn't automatically build wealth. And nobody had ever explained the difference to me. Those two ideas sound similar, but they're completely different lives. One keeps you busy, The other slowly buys back your freedom. For years, I thought the problem was motivation. If I could just become more disciplined, more productive, more focused, everything would finally fall into place. But every month proved me wrong. The advice wasn't completely wrong. Hard work matters. It always will. But somewhere along the journey, we started confusing hard work with financial progress. Those are not the same thing. Look around tomorrow. Really look. You'll see people working incredibly hard. Construction workers, teachers, drivers, nurses, cashiers, parents working 2 jobs. None of them are lazy. Most of them are doing everything society asked them to do. One evening, I watched a father carrying heavy grocery bags while his little daughter laughed about something that happened at school. He smiled back, but I couldn't help wondering, was he carrying only groceries, or was he carrying invisible pressure too? That moment stayed with me, because I realized almost everyone is carrying something we can't see. Bills, responsibilities, dreams they've postponed, goals they've quietly stopped talking about. That was the night I stopped asking, why am I failing? And started asking, what system am I trapped inside? Sometimes the question changes your life long before the answer does. So I started from the beginning. If I wanted to escape the loop, I first needed to understand exactly how it worked. Not the version people talked about, the version nobody talked about. Because invisible problems always require invisible answers first. When I finally gave the problem a name, something strange happened. I stopped feeling defeated. Because once something has a name, it can be understood. And once it's understood, it can be changed. For years, I thought I needed to become a better worker. More disciplined, more productive, more motivated. But what if I was trying to solve the wrong problem? I realized something almost uncomfortable. From childhood, most of us were taught one sentence: work hard and life will reward you. Maybe your parents said it. Mine certainly did. And they said it with love because they believed it. Their parents had believed it too. They weren't wrong. They were preparing us for the world they knew. But the world changed. And nobody updated the instructions. Because the poverty loop doesn't begin with money. It begins with the first belief we never questioned. And once I uncovered that belief, I finally understood why working harder had never been enough. But that was only the beginning. The next discovery changed the way I looked at every paycheck I'd ever earned. There was a time when payday felt like winning. Not because I had become wealthier, but because for one brief moment, I felt safe. It's amazing how quickly one notification can change your mood. Your shoulders relax, you breathe easier. For a little while, the future doesn't seem so heavy. Then reality quietly knocks on the door. Not dramatically, not all at once, just one notification at a time. Rent, electricity, water, internet, transportation, groceries, none of them are surprises. Yet somehow they always arrive faster than the paycheck did. I used to think I was the only one living like this, until I started paying attention. Every apartment around mine had lights on. Every light represented another family, another worker, another dream, another person trying to make their paycheck stretch just a little farther. Sometimes we mistake relief for progress. Getting paid feels like moving forward. But if every paycheck disappears before it has the chance to build tomorrow, then we're not climbing. We're simply resetting. And that realization changed the questions I started asking. Because maybe the goal was never to make the paycheck bigger. Maybe the goal was to stop needing every dollar the moment it arrived. That question stayed with me longer than I expected. What if the problem isn't my paycheck, but my relationship with time? At first, I didn't even know what that meant, so I closed my notebook, made another cup of coffee, and just sat there, not looking for answers, just thinking. Then something so obvious crossed my mind. I'd never actually bought anything with money. I'd bought everything with hours of my life. When I bought dinner, I didn't really spend $20. I spent part of my Tuesday morning, when I paid my electricity bill, I wasn't handing over money. I was handing over hours I'd already lived, hours I'd never get back. Suddenly, money felt different. It wasn't paper anymore. It was time, wearing a different name. About a week later, I was riding home from work. Nothing unusual, just another crowded bus. But instead of looking at people's faces, I found myself wondering, how much time had each person traded today? The nurse, the mechanic, the student working part-time, the mother trying to hold everything together. Every single person on that bus was carrying home more than a paycheck. They were carrying another piece of their life. That's when I realized, most people aren't poor because they waste money. Most people are simply exhausted. And when you're exhausted, you don't always make decisions for your future. You make decisions to survive today. There's no shame in that. I've done it too, more times than I can count. That night, I wrote something I'll probably never forget. If my time creates my money, then the way I use my money should protect my time. I read it again, then again. Because for the first time, I wasn't thinking about becoming rich. I was thinking about becoming free, and maybe that's the goal I should have been chasing all along. Freedom isn't waking up one day with millions in the bank. For most ordinary people, freedom begins much smaller. It's paying a bill without feeling anxious. It's replacing something that's broken without panicking. It's knowing one unexpected expense won't erase months of hard work. When I finally understood that, I stopped chasing the image of wealth, and I started chasing peace. Saturday mornings always felt different. For once, I wasn't rushing anywhere. No alarm, no emails, no deadlines, just silence. Funny enough, that's when my mind asked the loudest questions. I used to believe habits only meant things like waking up early, going to the gym, or reading books. But money has habits too, invisible ones, the kind you don't notice because you've repeated them for years. My first habit wasn't buying expensive things. It was much simpler than that. Money arrived, and my brain immediately started asking, what do I need to pay? Then, what do I want? I almost never asked, what should I protect first? That single missing question quietly shaped every paycheck I'd ever earned. It reminded me of something so ordinary. Imagine it's raining outside. Most of us instinctively grab an umbrella before walking into the storm. Not because we enjoy carrying it, but because we know what's coming. Yet every payday, I walked into financial storms completely unprepared. Not because I lacked discipline, because nobody had ever taught me to prepare differently. The first change I made wasn't earning more. It wasn't finding another job. It wasn't investing thousands of dollars. It was learning that every paycheck deserves a plan before the world starts making plans for it. That lesson sounds small, but looking back, I think it was the first real step I ever took out of the loop. Sometimes changing your financial future doesn't begin with making more money. Sometimes it begins with asking a better question. Not, how much can I spend, but what deserves protecting before anything else? That one question quietly changed the way I looked at every paycheck that came after. A little later that afternoon, I decided to take a walk. Not because I needed anything. Sometimes walking helps me think. As I passed one shop after another, I noticed something. Almost everyone looked like they were doing well. Nice clothes, new phones, designer trainers, people laughing over expensive coffee. For a moment, I caught myself thinking, maybe I'm the one falling behind. Then I laughed to myself. Not because anything was funny, but because I remembered something. There was a time people probably looked at me and assumed I had everything under control too. What they couldn't see was the spreadsheet on my laptop, the bills waiting at home, the conversations I had with myself every month. Appearances are incredibly convincing. Reality usually isn't. That's when I understood something I'd been doing for years without realizing it. Comparison doesn't always make you buy luxury. Sometimes it simply convinces you that good enough isn't good enough anymore. A phone that still works suddenly feels old. Clothes that are perfectly fine start feeling outdated. A perfectly enjoyable life starts feeling small because you're measuring it against someone else's highlight reel. That afternoon, I made another promise to myself. Not that I'd stop buying nice things. There's nothing wrong with enjoying your money. The promise was much simpler. I would stop buying things just to feel like I was keeping up. Because every time I compared my life to someone else's, I quietly forgot to appreciate the progress I'd already made. And maybe that's one of the most expensive habits we never see. Not because it empties our wallets overnight, but because it slowly convinces us that enough will never be enough. The poverty loop isn't only about numbers. Sometimes it's about the stories we tell ourselves. If you constantly believe you're behind, you'll keep making decisions from fear. But when you learn to measure your progress against who you were yesterday, instead of who someone else appears to be today, something begins to change. Not just your finances, your peace. As I walked home, another memory came back to me. I can't even count how many times I told myself, it's okay. Next month's paycheck will cover it. Next month. Those two words became my favorite financial plan. Not because it was a good plan, but because it was the only one I had. I remember buying something I didn't really need one weekend. Nothing outrageous, just something I convinced myself I'd earned. As I paid for it, I actually said, I'll balance it out next month. The funny thing is, next month arrived carrying its own problems, its own bills, its own surprises. And suddenly I wasn't borrowing from next month's money anymore. I was borrowing from next month's peace. That realization changed something inside me. The problem wasn't only the money. It was the habit of giving tomorrow a job before tomorrow had even arrived. Every time I expected my future paycheck to rescue me, I made my future a little smaller. Not overnight, not dramatically, just little by little, month after month. Maybe you've done it too. Maybe you've told yourself, I'll save next month, I'll start investing next month, I'll build an emergency fund after this paycheck. I've said every one of those things, not because I was lazy, not because I didn't care, because surviving today always felt more urgent than preparing for tomorrow. And that's exactly how the loop protects itself. It convinces us there will always be a better time to begin. That night, I stopped asking myself one question. How do I survive another month? Instead, I asked a different one. What would someone who's slowly becoming financially free do differently, starting today? The answer wasn't complicated, it wasn't glamorous, and it definitely wasn't quick. But it was real. Because escaping the poverty loop doesn't happen in one giant leap. It begins with one different decision, then another, until one day, you look back and realize you're no longer walking in circles. For years, I thought freedom would arrive all at once. A bigger paycheck, a better job, a lucky break. But freedom rarely arrives like that. Most of the time, it arrives quietly, hidden inside small choices that nobody else notices. And those small choices eventually create a life that everyone notices. The next morning, nothing around me had changed. My salary hadn't increased, my bills hadn't disappeared, my apartment was still the same, but something inside me felt different. For the first time, I stopped waiting for life to become easier and started asking myself, how can I become wiser with what I already have? That question changed everything. I used to think money disappeared because life was expensive. Sometimes that's true. Life is expensive, but I also realized money behaves a lot like people. If you never give it a destination, it eventually wanders somewhere else. That was my first lesson. Every paycheck needed a purpose before the world decided one for me. The first budget I ever made was honestly terrible. I changed it 3 times in 1 week, forgot expenses, underestimated groceries, completely ignored transportation. I remember looking at the page and laughing, not because I'd failed, but because it was the first time my money wasn't making all the decisions. I was, and strangely enough, that felt like progress. One thing nobody tells you is that changing your financial life is messy. You'll forget things, you'll make mistakes. Some months you'll feel like you're moving backwards. I certainly did. But here's what I finally understood. Moving slowly is still moving. As long as you're learning, you're no longer standing still. If you're listening to this and you feel trapped, I want you to hear this carefully. You don't need to transform your entire financial life this week. You don't need to double your income by next month. You don't need to pretend everything is okay. You only need to make one decision today that your future self will quietly thank you for. Because the poverty loop wasn't built in one day, and it won't be broken in one day either. But every time you choose tomorrow over impulse, every time you protect something instead of consuming everything, you're weakening the loop, little by little, without even noticing. Looking back, I don't think my biggest financial breakthrough was learning how to earn more. It was learning how to pause, to think before reacting, to stop believing every paycheck had to disappear just because it arrived. That pause became the space where better decisions finally had room to grow. When I started asking why I always felt behind, I thought I needed a bigger paycheck. Instead, I found something much more valuable, a different way of thinking. And looking back, I don't think the poverty loop was ever just about money. It was about believing that working harder was the only answer. I used to think success looked like having more money, more things, more status. But these days, success feels quieter. It's sleeping without financial panic keeping me awake. It's opening my banking app without feeling afraid. It's knowing I'm slowly building something even if nobody else can see it yet. And honestly, that kind of progress doesn't impress strangers, but it changes lives. If you remember only one thing from this video, let it be this. Your future usually isn't changed by one giant decision. It's shaped by hundreds of quiet ones that almost nobody notices. One better habit, one better question, one thoughtful pause before spending. Those moments may feel small today, but they rarely stay small forever. Maybe your story looks different from mine. Maybe your challenges are bigger, or maybe they're smaller. But one thing I believe is that none of us are defined by the loop we started in. We're defined by the moment we decide to stop walking in circles. Not perfectly, not quickly, just intentionally. And if today is the day you make even one decision that your future self will thank you for, then maybe this is the first day you're no longer trapped by the poverty loop. Thank you for spending these minutes with me. If this conversation made you stop and think, then it was worth having. This wasn't about becoming rich overnight, it was about understanding something I wish I'd learned much earlier. And this is only the beginning. Because there are other invisible money traps, other habits, and other lessons that quietly shape our lives. We'll explore them together. Until then, keep asking better questions, protect your peace,